At the start of the film, a frightened businessman is secretly recorded while revealing secrets about a dangerous group after a meeting. As he heads to his car, a Jeep suddenly crashes into him. Despite his struggle, the Jeep rams his vehicle off the edge of the parking structure. The story then shifts to Will Gerard, an English teacher, and his wife Laura, a musician. They are celebrating their wedding anniversary while watching the news report about the businessman's death. Even though the city is falling into chaos, they still enjoy their happy time together. Will and Laura went dancing with Jimmy, the principal of Will's school, and his wife. That night, after making love, Will gave Laura a necklace as a token of their love. The next day, after work, Will and Jimmy met for their usual chess game, both playing with great focus. Meanwhile, Laura finished her orchestra rehearsal. As she walked to her car, a man suddenly appeared with a gun and dragged her outside. The man threw Laura into the back seat. Despite her struggle, he assaulted her brutally. At the same time, Will and Jimmy said goodnight to each other. Moments later, Will received an alert on his phone and rushed to a nearby hospital. There, he was led into a room and was shocked to see Laura beaten, bruised, and barely responsive. Outside her room, Jimmy and another friend, Trudy, arrived to offer support. Jimmy was certain the police would catch the attacker and offered to answer calls for Will if he needed help. Will was sitting alone in the waiting room when a man in a suit approached and offered his condolences about his wife. He introduced himself as Simon, explaining that he had gone through a similar experience a few years earlier. Simon revealed that he knew the man who attacked Laura, naming him Haji, a repeat offender. Unexpectedly, Simon offered to take care of Haji for Will, avoiding a long trial and sparing Laura from further trauma. He claimed to represent an organization that punishes criminals who escape justice and said they were interested in Will's case. In return, they might ask Will for a small favor in the future. Will hesitated at first, unwilling to get involved, but the thought of avenging Laura drew him in. He finally agreed to the plan. He was instructed to buy 2 chocolate bars from a vending machine as a signal of his acceptance, all under the watch of unseen figures. That night, Haji returned to his apartment, proud of the necklace he had taken from Laura as a trophy. Suddenly, a gloved man entered, terrifying him. The intruder pointed a gun, and though Haji tried to fight back, he was ultimately killed. The next day, a man claiming to be an insurance agent delivered a package to Will. Inside, he found a photo of Haj and Laura's necklace. He told Laura, who was still recovering, that her attacker was dead. Laura cried tears of relief. Soon after, they returned home. Laura's face was still swollen from the attack. Will promised to stay by her side. Laura apologized and said she now wanted new locks and window bars. 6 months later, they were still trying to move on. Laura wanted to buy a gun, but Will refused to keep one in the house. Still, Laura went to the local shooting range to learn how to use a gun and bought a can of pepper spray. One evening, while they were at a local bar, Will received a call from Simon, who wanted to talk. Simon directed him to a store, told him to buy a pack of gum, and exit through the back door. There, Will saw Simon waiting in his car. After some hesitation, Will got in, and Simon handed him an envelope, instructing him to drop it into a mailbox by the lake at exactly 4:15 the next day. The following day, Will went to the zoo, but before he could mail the envelope, he got a call telling him to open it. Inside the envelope was a photo of a man with his family and a phone number. Simon ordered Will to watch the man, use the code phrase "the hungry rabbit jumps" to warn him, then abduct his wife and children. Will began following them around the zoo, but found no trace of the man. The next day, in his classroom, Will was shocked to see the phone number written on his board. He angrily called Simon, only to realize Simon was waiting outside the school. Will refused to continue the deal, furious that Simon had invaded his privacy. But Simon ignored Will and reminded him of their deal. Later, Will accidentally bumped into a man who handed him an envelope before disappearing. Inside were documents accusing Will's target of being a convicted criminal. Will went home, but soon received another call from Simon, instructing him to kill the target by pushing him off a bridge along his usual route. Will tried to object, but Simon dismissed him and hung up. The next morning, Laura admitted that something felt wrong and blamed herself, but Will reassured her that it wasn't her fault. Before going to work, Will discovered that his car tire had been slashed, forcing him to follow Simon's instructions and take the bus. When the bus reached the overpass, Will didn't get off and continued to work instead. After class, Simon confronted him and reminded him of their deal. Will refused, saying he was not a killer, and told Simon to leave him alone. That evening, Will and Laura went out for dinner, but Simon suddenly appeared, pretending to be an old colleague of Will's. He sat down at their table, but Will told him to leave. It was then that Will realized the seriousness of the trouble he was in. The next morning, Will went to the overpass and saw his target getting off another bus. He waited until the man approached and tried to talk to him, but the man, suspecting an attack, fought back. In the struggle, he fell over the edge and died. Panicked, Will fled the scene and jumped onto the next bus. Meanwhile, Laura was checking Will's car and found her necklace in the glove compartment. Soon after, Will received a call from Simon, who thanked him for completing the job and told him he was now free from their deal. Will saw two students fighting and struck one of them, which led to the student being suspended for 3 weeks. When he returned home, Laura confronted him about the necklace, but Will refused to explain. Laura left for her rehearsal. Moments later, there was a knock at the door, and 2 detectives arrived to arrest Will for murder. He was taken in for questioning, where he denied killing anyone. The police then showed him surveillance footage from the overpass, which captured Will and the victim, Alan, walking there, but the actual confrontation was missing because the camera in that area had been disabled. The police also showed Will a video from his own phone, which captured him following Alan at the zoo. Alan's family revealed that he was actually an investigative journalist. Seeing no other option, Will asked for a lawyer, but the lieutenant refused since he hadn't been officially charged. Instead, the lieutenant began asking him odd, simple questions until he mentioned the phrase, "the hungry rabbit." Once Will answered, the lieutenant released him and warned him to leave the city before Simon came to kill him. After rehearsal, Laura tried to call Will, but the police answered his phone. Will went to a payphone and left a message with Trudy for Laura, saying he would try to meet her after rehearsal the next day. He then went to his old high school where he learned more about Alan and saw his memorial. The following day, Will slipped into Laura's rehearsal space and caught her attention. He explained everything that was happening, and Laura understood. She gave him money and the gun she had bought. When the police suddenly entered the rehearsal, Will quickly slipped out. He then attended Alan's memorial where he saw Alan's ID and secretly stole it. From Alan's friends, Will learned that Alan had been investigating Simon's vigilante organization, and he finally understood why Simon wanted him dead. Meanwhile, a woman inside spotted Will and made a phone call. Soon after, 2 of Simon's men showed up. Realizing the danger, Will ran. One man chased Will while another jumped into Simon's car. Will ran onto the highway and climbed over the edge just before Simon and his men could reach him. He fell onto the highway, dropping his phone in the process. One of the men tried to reach him but was hit by a car and dragged several feet. Meanwhile, Laura was leaving the building when a detective appeared, claiming to have evidence that could prove her innocence. She got into the car but soon realized the men were not really police officers. When the car stopped, Laura sprayed the 2 men and escaped. She then broke into Alan's workplace, found his desk, and stole some documents before being discovered. On the street, Will spotted a police car and quickly slipped into a nearby hotel. There, he stole a jacket and a parking ticket, which he used to take a car and drive into an alley. He went through Alan's documents and found receipts from a gas station Alan often visited. Will drove to the station and learned from the attendant that Alan had a storage unit nearby. He paid the man for directions and rammed his way inside. There, he discovered a boat and began digging around it. Meanwhile, a newspaper vendor arrived at the gas station carrying papers with Will's wanted photo on the front page. On the boat, Will discovered a box and smashed it open. As he left, he saw the police arriving and sped off. Will led them on a high-speed chase through the city. He tried to lose them at a railroad crossing, but when that failed, he rammed a police car, causing it to crash. The officers were unharmed and Will kept driving. He reached an alley where he opened a lockbox and found a DVD. The disc showed Alan interviewing the man from the beginning of the film about the vigilante organization. Will also found photos of Simon meeting with his friend Jimmy. He rushed to Jimmy's house and stormed in with a gun. Jimmy admitted he had joined the group after his brother was killed and revealed that he was the one who asked the lieutenant to release Will. Will held a gun to Jimmy's head and forced him to reveal Simon's real name. He then left, unaware that he was being followed. He stopped when a man approached him with a gun, calling him a wanted criminal. But Will quickly overpowered the man, who panicked and let him go. Simon, whose real name is Eugene Cook, a businessman, sent Will a video interview along with recordings from the overpass that proved he didn't kill Alan. Simon agreed to meet Will for an exchange at the Superdome, where a monster truck show was taking place. Meanwhile, Jimmy went to Trudy to ask about Laura's location, pretending to be helping her. This led him to Laura, but someone else suddenly broke into the room. At the show, Simon received a call from Will with instructions on where to meet. The two finally came face to face, but then Simon showed Will a photo of Laura with her mouth taped shut and forced him to follow. They entered an abandoned mall, where Will saw Laura being held by Jimmy and several other men. Simon took the tape from Will and ordered his men to kill both him and Laura. When Simon was called a psychopath, he flew into a rage. Suddenly, Jimmy shot the man standing next to Laura, while Will fought another on the escalator. Jimmy and Simon exchanged gunfire because Jimmy refused to kill innocent people. Jimmy was shot in the chest and killed by Simon. Laura tried to escape but was caught by Simon. Will attacked him, and the two tumbled down the escalator. Simon managed to recover and was about to shoot, but Laura fired first and killed him. Moments later, the lieutenant arrived, claiming that Jimmy and Simon had killed each other and insisting that Will and Laura were never there. He asked Will to join his organization, but Will refused. The two left together, and Will's name was cleared after the footage of his fight with Alan was released. Later, Will went to Alan's old workplace to hand a disc to another reporter. When the man accepted the disc, he simply said, "The Hungry Rabbit," and walked away.